Hello. So my name is Brandon Diep, and it's my MovieJournal project. And you must be the junior developer who understands, only Java is not a senior developer, but hey, I'm here to explain to you my source code and my project. And so what MovieJournal is, just a quick explanation. It's essentially a desktop application, but with Java Swing that allows users to essentially create an account. They can write, delete, edit movie reviews, their own reviews. They can upload their tickets, favorite reviews, search and sort reviews. Yeah, and see statistics like how many times you went to the theaters or how many reviews you wrote. Um, yeah, such as that. And the tech stack of this project is very simple. I'm using Java, of course. Front end uses Java Swing as the graphical user interface and MySQL for the database, and testing's done with JUnit. So this right here is my driver class. Essentially, it's the entry point of my application. Um, but actually, I'm going to explain each folder and just kind of go through the process with you. So let's look at our folder structure. Each folder is basically a well-defined responsibility. The graphical user interface focus on user interaction. The manager folder handles business logic and database operations. The model contains only data and basic validations, and the util are helper functions for the database and password validation. And the factory and strategy are folders for the design patterns we utilize. They will be explained more later, but just a quick summary about what these folders are. Let's go ahead and look at our dependencies. So, let's I kind of explained some of these when we were talking about the tech stack, but let's just quickly overview it. So for our first dependency, we have MySQL connector that essentially enables Java to connect to the MySQL database. So it's a driver for database operations. We have bcrypt, which is secure password hashing for users when they create an account, and it's one-way hashing, automatic salting. It's adaptive. Um, Next, we also have .env, which is generally used to load environment variables from the .env file we have here, um, which you should use to keep sensitive database, credentials out of code. So that's important. And as you may recall, JUnit for essentially test. So those are my dependencies. And let's begin by going to each folder and file my code. I'm going to go ahead and start with the model folder. And just to quickly talk about it, models basically represent the core data structures of my applications, private fields, getters, and setters. Um, I use the build pattern in movie review Java, which I will talk about, but let's look at user.java first. So I have some variables or constants whose values can be changed initially, but let's look at the important stuff. My private variables, just like any other class, you can see like a user has attributes of an ID, username, email, password, created at last login is active, to see if is their account active or deactivated. I'm also have like a essentially constructor to help initialize a user object, just like any other class would, as you know, since you are a junior Java developer. But I have a getter and setter for each attribute too. So class getters and setters. Um, Kind of want to look at some key methods of this class. So we can look at set plain text password. Um, so basically, it uses the hash password method, as you can see here, and it takes the method from the password util class. So I can quickly talk about this one tier too. So we can see the hash password method here. But essentially how it works is that it takes the plain text password and automatically hashes it using bcrypt. It never stores text passwords and, you know, pretty much it. I guess to also explain how bcrypt works, it's essentially a salt is generated. So bcrypt automatically generates a random result for each password. And a salt is what is it? It's essentially like a random string of data that's added to a user's password before his hash, and that kind of helps protects the user's password. So that's that. Another important method I want to look at is verify password here in this user class. So verified password, or essentially, it's kind of self-explanatory, but what it does is that it compares um, the plain text with the stored hash. So if you look at the method here, you can see I have edge cases too to make sure it's not empty. But basically it uses bcrypt secure comparison and returns true if the password matches. Yeah, so that's basically a quick summary of my user class. Now let's go ahead and move on to the movie review Java file, my model. And so, these models are definitely like representations of the tables in my database. But okay, same idea. Um, some constants and final attributes. Over here, we have our private attributes. We have the user ID, title, director, genre, rating, review, then watch, tick image path, and favorite. And then we have a constructor, essentially to initialize this for an object. Um, but yeah, and because this is like similar to the user method, I kind of want to talk about the builder design pattern used here. So you might be asking, what a builder design pattern is. And so what a builder design pattern is that essentially it's the creational design pattern. It separates the construction of a complex object from its representation, so that it's basically like so that the same construction process can like create different representations. And it has a build method that creates the final object, and it allows us step-by-step construction of objects. And it provides like a nice interface for method chaining. So like a quick summary, what's good about this is that it avoids giant constructors, and it makes construction step by step. So the builders class has these like attributes, and you'll notice the builder design pattern has a lot of setters. Set ID, set user ID, set title, set director, set genre, set rating, set review, set day one, set technical and set favorite. That's a lot. So these setters will operate on the builder, not the final object. But like I mentioned before, these setters can help us avoid creating giant constructors. So it's good to have these for the builder design pattern. And once we call this build method here, we create the final immutable object. Also, I have this builder method to instantiate the object, and create um, sorry, my mind went blank, but basically this builder object to instantiate the object, and we can see it in use in the movie review manager.java. Um, so if I go all the way down to the build, yeah, right here. Basically, I'll explain more of this what this file does, but it handles like CRUD operations, managing movie-related database operations, like searching, sorting, and observer notifications. I'll explain more in detail later, but let's go way down to the build method here. So you see it calls the builder method here, and it uses each of the builder setters, so like the set ID, set user ID, etc. Instead of creating this huge constructor, which is good, and it calls the build method at the end here to officially create the object. So you can fill these values, and these are filled to create movie review. Um, a lot of these is just done to help convert a role from a database into a movie review Java object. So we can look at execute query here, in the method above, and basically it's like for each row, the query review from set reads the column values, and it tries to build a movie review object. And it could take an SQL statement, for example, like um, let's see, select all from, yeah, select this one. So select all from movie reviews where user ID is like that. And then you'll see it like essentially in use here. And then it becomes like an execute query. So get reviews by users, execute query, boom, boom, and then we get the reviews. So yeah, so that's basically how the builder pattern was utilized in my movie review charge. I'll definitely talk more in detail about the movie review manager. Um, but just want to quickly explain this builder design pattern. And since we're in here, I guess now is a good time to talk about the sort of this manager folder here. So starting here in the movie review manager file right now, we could talk about the files inside. So let's look at the movie review manager. Um, so essentially like the purpose of the manager folder is basically form validation, like CRUD database operations, um, perhaps like data transformation, and it serves as a design pattern for observer notifications, which I also explained previously. So I kind of want to talk about like some important methods here. I want to talk about the observer pattern after these methods, so let's start with that. So, kind of to like initially explain how the process kind of works, let me open my graphical user interface and go to review management panel.java. And here I had like an add review. So like basically imagine like there's a button where essentially a user clicks it and then this method executes a function and then this method is called the add review. So so if I click this, you'll notice that I'm in my movie review manager.java and it's calling this method here. And basically it would do the prepare review for insert and it's just cleaning the text. But after the movie review is passed into insert review into database, if you look at this method here, we can see it kind of prepares like a SQL statement to be used to be executed. So we can insert this review into our database. So we can set like the parameters right here, and then we have this statement to execute the update to make sure it gets updated into their database. And we could see this for like the delete movie review here. That one was for the add review. But we could see kind of the same idea apply here for delete review where it says, getting the delete review SQL right there. And then we can see, it prepares that statement, stuff like that. Um, and then we can scroll down for bulk delete reviews too. So this one will bulk to delete the reviews. Um, can scroll down more for the updating review, and they're all you making sure they do the execute update function to make sure the SQL statement um execute for this function. Yeah, but same thing, set the parameters. Kind of the same pattern, get all movies. I also have a search review function to search for the reviews, execute the statements, search parameters, and I'll try to get me the reviews back. Um, but yeah, that's basically, and you can see I have all these other methods too. So like I could have get total reviews, get average rating, just these smaller SQL database operation methods, update favorite status, set favorite, notify review update. I'll talk about the notify later in the observer, um, but yeah, that's kind of like a brief overview of like some of the main functions. But to kind of get a little bit more clear overview, I can talk about the observer design pattern. All right, so what is the review change listener? Or let me talk about more specifically what is the observer pattern. So essentially the observer pattern essentially it's like a behavioral design pattern that defines a one-to-many dependency between the objects. So when one object like the subject or observable changes state, all the dependent objects, the observers, are notified. And the way I kind of like think of this to help me kind of like memorize this is that like, imagine like a YouTube notification system. Someone uploads a YouTube video and the subscribers get notified. And basically, also in the observer pattern, you definitely can allow your observers to be added or removed dynamically. Um, and then the observable tries to maintain a list of observers and I, also tries to like notify them of like any state changes. So kind of going back to the review change listener, these were like one of the first things I did with the observer pattern. And this was basically creating the observer interface. So I could have used property change listener, property change support to implement this, but I decided to create my own observer interface. Now, why might you create your own like a listener right here, like the review change listener instead of using property change listener? Well, me personally, I felt that like the property change listener can't express the main specific events I needed. Um, like my project deals with like review specific actions. So like the review added, review updated, review deleted, on review bulk delete, etc. But these might not be simple for property change events. I mean, maybe they are, but I decided to just take this approach. Anyways, so what the observer interface does is that essentially it defines the events or like the notifications that the observers want to receive whenever subject, which will be my movie review manager or the observable, change the state. So now we need to understand, who calls these methods. So you could think of like going back to the YouTube example, the YouTube channel is the observable, but here it's my movie review manager. So one of the first things that you want to do is that you want to define, quickly search for it. Yeah, your listeners. So we build the observable subject here, and we define a list of listeners for the subject. And basically, this is like the list of objects that we want to be notified whenever something happens to the movie reviews, an ad, update, or delete, etc. But next we have like the observer registration method. So let me go to that. Oh, sorry, bad typing. All right, so these are my observer registration methods. You can see I have one called add, review, change listener, and another remove change listeners. These will basically just add or remove observers to a list of listeners, pretty self-explanatory. But next we also define our notifying methods. So I have a notify review added, notify review updated, notify review deleted, notify review bulk deleted, etc., notify bulk cleared. And so that whenever these reviews added, updated, or deleted, the observable will try to trigger these notifications. And you will notice that it uses like on review add and on review updated that we mentioned in like the review change listener file. So this is important, so this is how someone would define the observable. But now let's go ahead and look at the concrete observers. So let's go to review manage panel.java. Uh, so for example here, what you want to do is that you want to implement the review change listener in the method header. That's how kind of begin this concrete observer. And this is a class of many classes that will be like this. So like my dashboard panel, let me show it right here. Um, yeah, my dashboard panel and my favorite review panel right here. See how it implements review change listener. This one implements review change listener. And so going back to review management panel, how it implements that. Basically, the review change listener methods are there because we implement them. So we can go ahead and scroll down and find them. Let me do this actually. Yeah. Okay, so you see how like the methods from the review change listener are here, and we're basically overriding them. But basically, imagine like so when a review is added, um, going back to the movie review manager, um, notify review added. So basically the listener on review added. Um, and you can see it's gonna get kind of used here. So like for example, the panel or UI should basically update or refresh. And this will happen for the notify review updated and deleted, etc. And basically they should behave the same. But lastly, we basically need to register our observers. So continuing to this, let's go here, send movie review manager. And as you remember when I discussed the review manager about registering observers so they can receive notifications, we generally want to pass in the object of the movie review manager. And this contains like SQL operations interacting with the database. So any updates to the database will most likely notify the observers. And basically, to summarize how the observer works, let's imagine a user adds a review. So the movie review manager will basically save it and call notify review added right here. And the review management panel, going here on review added, is basically invoked. And basically, it's going to go ahead and refresh the data, and the UI will automatically update. And yeah, that's basically um, the observer pattern. Hopefully I explained that well. And yeah, thanks. So I think right now we're going to go ahead and move on to the dirt pattern, which is strategy. Actually, before moving on to the strategy design pattern, I kind of forgot to talk about the user manager. But this should be relatively quick. So basically, it's user manager, kind of the same idea where essentially handles a lot of database operations. I can have a lot of SQL statements up there. I'm initializing my database here. Kind of the same thing as a movie review manager. So if I go back, you can see a lot of SQL statements, a lot of these things, initializing the database too. So yeah, very similar. Um, but I'll just be going over like some of the methods I created. So when you're creating these things, especially if you're talking about user account creation, you want to make sure you have a way for the user to sign up. So you want to register your user, get their username, get their email, etc. And when you do this, you want to make sure you save their information to the database. So I have this insert user method, where essentially it takes those details and prepares that insert user SQL statement over here. Basically gets the username, email, password, etc. Gets those values, and then makes sure to execute those statements. And I have these parameters too. This method as you saw before. So I also have a login user, authenticate user, login user by email. Um, Traffic is this, get user by username, get user by email. Uh, a lot of these user methods needed. Updating passwords. So very a lot of user stated stuff. So this creates like a sense of organization in your project that you definitely want to have. So this is very good. Um, but that about covers it for the manager folder. So yeah, you can see I talked about the review, change listener, and how it's utilized in the movie review manager. But let me go ahead and quickly switch the focus to the strategy folder. So basically, in my strategy folder, I basically talk about the strategy pattern and kind of contain all these methods here. But essentially, the strategy pattern is since you're a Java developer, essentially it's like a behavior design pattern which defines a family of algorithms. And it calculates like each one, making them like interchangeable. It favors like composition over inheritance and provides a common interface for these strategies and what else? Also allows like the algorithm to vary independently. So let me open this interface right here. So generally one of the first steps you want to do when defining a strategy design pattern is you want to define the strategy interface. And this will be our interface for different sorting strategies. This defines a contract that every sorting algorithm must follow. So that my client, essentially like the movie review manager, should follow. Um, but this enforces consistency across all sorting strategies. So, for example, if I want to look at the date newest, you can see I wrote this. It uses implements the sort method here, because it implements the sort strategy here, the interface we created, so we have access to the sort method, and we could find like a specific way of sorting reviews. And so this is basically like some code to sort the reviews by newest. And each class implements one specific way of sorting reviews. And, with the strategy interface and concrete strategies, we create our own way to sort reviews. Kind of like I said, but each class, encapsulates a different algorithm. So we can look at the date oldest, um, and like I said, the date newest, that one's reverse order, this one's natural order, rating highs, reverse order. Um, this one's just going to be normal order. Sort strategy, well, it's not normal, but it does like some code to make sure it's sorted from rating low. That's the factory. This is the factory, but title ascending, case sensitive order, knows last, and title ascending reversed, reverse order. So just a bunch of concrete strategies that we have. Let me talk about the sort strategy factory. This kind of implements sort of like the factory, sort of, but the factory decides which strategy to instantiate based on user input and the centralized object creation logic. Um, and so, creates a sort strategy based on the user input, kind of like I said, but and so if a user chooses, like date newest, it will use the date newest sort strategy. Um, yeah, just for more organization. and these two too. So you can see all these like concrete strategies I defined here being used. Now, if I go to like, if you want to see this essentially in use, if I go to like get sorted reviews, you can see it's going to get all my reviews here using this method. So we can look at this. It gets execute query where I select all my reviews. Um, but going back to get sorted reviews, it creates a strategy based on what was chosen as a sort option and it sorts the reviews. But yeah, that's basically the strategy design pattern. And especially and kind of like a detailed explanation of all the code in my strategy folder. Um, Next thing, I'm probably gonna go ahead and look at the panel factory and probably talk about the factory pattern. So let's check that out. All right, factory pattern. So mainly I use the factory pattern for my graphical user interface, but I'll explain what it is. So um, factory pattern is basically Um, so basically, it provides like an interface for creating objects, without specifying the exact classes. It also does like encapsulation, where it encapsulates like the object creation logic, and it centralizes this in like one place. Um, and it tries to return objects, through a common interface. Um, But yeah, I feel like that kind of basically is the factory pattern. I guess I'll explain it better as I go through my code. So starting with the panel factory, in my code, I use the factory design pattern to sort my graphical user interface, as I stated. But the factory pattern is used when you want one place in your code that is responsible for, you know, making objects so one place. So we need, in my scenario, we need to create multiple graphical user interface panels. So we have login, sign up, dashboard, review management, favorite reviews, user profile panels, etc. But instead of creating them all over the application, we put them all panel creation in one class. And so, that's kind of what the factor is supposed to do, centralize and simplify the creation of related objects, and the factor decides which object to create. So the factor pattern takes some kind of input and creates the correct object based on that input. So I have the panel type enum, login, sign up, dashboard, review management, favorite reviews, user profile. And basically the factor uses that to decide which panel to make. So, kind of like explained over here, these six panels here. Um, but yeah, so like the factory returns objects that share a common parent, and a core requirement of the factory panel is that all produce, objects share a common type. And these panels extend the J panel, as you can see here. Public private static J panel create review, public static create review, favorite reviews panel, private static J. So all of them have like J panels right there. But so so the factory can return them as the J panel. So we can go ahead and see it in use here. So you can see we have login, sign up, dashboard, review management, favorite reviews, and user profile panel. So the factory has object creation details. Other classes in the app do not need to know which panel requires which manager, how each panel is created, um, how to configure like panel after creation. But this essentially like keeps the rest of the code clean and helps prevent duplication. And the factory handles everything behind the scenes. And what's great about this is that adding new panels is pretty easy. So if you later want to add a settings panel, um, statistics panel, recommendations panels in my application, I don't really have to touch any graphical user interface code here. I could just create a new panel class. So we can see, let's easy have up my favorite review panels here. Um, but yeah, basically I can essentially create my own in the future. If I want to do more, I could just create my new panel class, add them as a new num value here. So like a settings or statistics panel over here, or create that new panel class and then add a switch case over here, and basically just do this over here too. So And this makes the system flexible and easy to extend, which is a great benefit of factory pattern. So, in short, to summarize, the factory chooses the right panel, builds it for you, configures it, and hides all the creation details. So, pretty simple and actually quite helpful in my code. So, I really like this pattern. Um, Next thing we can finally talk about is the last design pattern, the singleton pattern. So, we're going to go ahead and talk about that design pattern, the singleton pattern. And the singleton pattern is a creational design pattern. And what it kind of does is like it wants to make sure that a class has only one instance, but it provides, global access to that instance. And that way it can help prevent multiple instantiations, added lazy initialization, so I could create instances only when needed. Um, yeah, so in my application, we only want one database connection manager. Um, and so here's my database connection file, as you can see here. But yeah, kind of like I said, we don't want to create multiple connection managers because, that can cause inconsistent configuration. That's one. Um, but it can also cause like potential, like you could say connection conflicts. And so what the singleton pattern kind of helps me here is that it kind of guarantees that only one database connection object will be created. So moving on, we can look at this private constructor right here. And this prevents other parts of the program from creating new objects. And in my code, this is, enforced by the private static volatile database connection instance. And, the constructor is private, so no one can call the new database connection. And the only way to get the instance is through the get instance method. And this is a very core part of the singleton pattern because it tries to hide a constructor so nobody can make another copy, and it provides, kind of like I said, a single global access point. So generally, how would we access this if it's, if we're hiding a constructor so no one can make another copy? Well, we need to look at the get instance method here. So singleton classes give you one place, as I mentioned, to access the shared instance. And here, that place is the get instance method. And basically, the instance is globally accessible. Um, what else? The instance itself is created only once too. And the only way to get it is through, get instance. Um, get the as for the global access. But we also have um I believe I added lazy instantiation. So meaning the object is not created um until someone requests it. So notice that we only create the instance inside get instance when it's null. Sorry, I don't know why I keep saying but basically this means the object is created on demand, not an application startup. So this kind of helps satisfies the singleton requirement, create instance only when needed. But yeah, that was pretty short because database connection is my only singleton pattern. But yeah, that's all the 5 design patterns um, used in this project. It was builder, observer, strategy, factory, and singleton patterns. So, hopefully you were able to learn something. But now I want to quickly move on to 2 key major features that were added in this project with time I have left. So let's go ahead and get to that. All right, so last time I kind of talked about the database connection.java. I was using the singleton pattern. So I talked about the util strategy model manager and factory, but now I have to talk about the graphical user interface. And so basically kind of like how I explained in the beginning, this driver or our main application or main.java basically was the entry point to our application. So when I do that, it launches my main graphical user interface for MovieJournal. And you can see it kind of utilizes my user manager, my movie review manager. It also has those panels um, that I was explaining about and how they were basically being used in the panel factory design pattern. And basically, panels are basically essentially like user interfaces, sections of the user interface. Since I don't want to spend too much time showing what it looks like, but just imagine It's kind of like when you have an app and you go to a different tab, you could just say that's basically a panel. So if I go to the login tab, that's basically a panel. If I go to the sign up tab, that's basically a panel. So basically just imagine tabs in website. And so basically I'm creating a bunch of panels, I'm applying styles, I'm creating buttons, and I'm creating listeners. So creating new buttons, setting up event listeners. And event listeners are basically like, I guess someone wants to describe it as kind of like a Smurf. Basically, if you interact with them, they'll basically perform an action. So it's like a button. If you press a button, that button might, in the background, perform a whole bunch of functions. So I have event listeners for the login panel, the sign up panel. Um, basically methods that should happen basically when they're interacted with. So basically that's my main movie journal. This is basically not really that important, but basically a panel for applying essential styling in my application. So if you ever work with web development or CSS, you know you have like a global styles. This is just a component, especially also if you also work in web development, you know that you have components. Um, just for like the separation of code and organization. So you can create a separate file for components and design what you want. But basically, this is a star rating component where essentially it just kind of like designs the star and creates the half star. So I've created a full star and create a no star and display the star rating. So um, yeah, basically that was our 30 splash screen. Nothing too important, just a little intro when the user logins panel, so just like a nice little loading movie journal loading screen. So talk about this, talk about this. Look at the different panels. So this is the sign up panel. We have these fields, and this is kind of important. So basically, these fields are basically going to kind of essentially store our data to be sent to like if you recall when I was talking about the manager, like the ad review. So we need these fields to hold these values so we can pass it in. So basically same idea where I'm creating formatting and styling for these panels and applying fonts, style button, set up event listeners. So see how the sign up button has an action listener. Basically when this event happens, it'll perform the sign up. It'll grab these fields from the username, the email field, validate the input, and you can see how it kind of just checks it. So if everything's good, it's gonna call on sign up. Um, but yeah, that's basically let me keep scrolling down. Do that, perform sign up, confirm password. There's all these checks right here. Is valid email, apply styling, set up sign up listener, and clear fields. So basically a lot of UI interaction here. Probably like a login panel is part of the same thing. So same thing. A lot of UI over here, creating decorative panel, a lot of panels. But yeah, basically you could play inner panels. So like a text field could be a panel. Maybe not the best description, but just like a function, I guess. A certain section could be called a panel. Um, but yeah, same thing for the login button. It has an actual listener. So if someone clicks the login button, call the perform login function. It says to validate input, and then I'll call like the login listener. But yeah, same idea essentially. Favorite reviews panel. It's gonna get the head and display the favorite reviews. Update details, images on review. Dashboard panel. Basically, it's the same thing. Gonna set review manager. So do this. Look at all this statistics. A lot of UI, a lot of UI. Yeah, very UI intensive code for this project. And you can see I have like the listeners here. That'll basically update in response to the manager. And then I talked about this too. There were a lot, the review management file, very heavy, a lot of buttons. Yeah, a lot of buttons. So you can see this here, a lot of panels. Kind of just skimming it through fast because of time, but um, you can kind of get the idea. So the idea is like you create a button, you create a field, and you add an action listener. Add an action listener, add an action listener, create a bunch of functions, validate it, do that, and then Based on that, you can display a user interface. Um, and you can see for this field, save review. I create a review based on the J. So like if I go to title field right here, let me go up here. You can see it's a JText field, and so basically that's going to be saved into this review object, and then that review object is eventually going to be passed into this add review for the movie review manager. So that's basically how it works, and you'll see that in the login and sign up panels as I explained. But yeah, very detailed explanation of the code. But yeah, I feel like that's basically a clear explanation of my code. Um, I I'll just skim through these tests. I'm not sure if I have to do an explanation about these, but essentially, when you're creating tests or whenever you have functions, you generally want to create tests. And so, for example, I have add review tests. So basically, you should have a function called add review, and you want to make sure that it contains like that review when you're testing it. So you create a whole bunch of these tests for user, model review, user test, database connection for all your functions basically. And this ensures that your application just works correctly and works good. But yeah, definitely want to create those tests. Um, create edge cases tests, should create review, should handle valid format. Um, yeah, a lot of tests that you gotta make. But yeah, I really wish I had more time. I know I said 30 minutes, but um, hopefully I explained it as good as I can to you as I went through all these folders and I explained the design patterns. Maybe if you can always reach out to me, but yeah, I would say that's my project. Um, in the end, I could probably talk about the two key features as an extra point um near the end of the video, but this is essentially like the end. But thank you for watching this code explanation of my final project. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.